The howling wind carried Grace Turner's desperate plea across the dusty main street of Silver Creek as she clutched her worn valise, the October chill of 1885 cutting through her threadbare coat. "Please, I'll cook and clean for nothing. I just need a place to stay." Her voice cracked as the stagecoach that had delivered her to this remote Montana Territory town disappeared into the distance, leaving her alone with nothing but $4 to her name and the clothes on her back. Sheriff Donovan leaned against the jailhouse porch, regarding the young woman with a mixture of pity and suspicion. At 24, Grace was pretty despite her exhaustion, honey blonde hair escaping a once fine hat, green eyes bright with unshed tears, and a determined set to her jaw that suggested she wasn't accustomed to begging. "Miss, Silver Creek ain't exactly flush with opportunities for a lady on her own," the sheriff said, straightening his vest. "Especially with winter coming." Grace squared her shoulders. "I'm a hard worker, sir. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, anything. I just need a chance." The sheriff scratched his graying beard. "Only place that might need help is the Oakley Ranch, about 3 miles north. Wade Oakley's been raising his boy alone since his wife passed in childbirth 5 years back. Might be he could use a housekeeper." His eyes narrowed. "But I should warn you, Oakley keeps to himself. Ain't the friendliest sort." Hope flickered in Grace's chest. "I can handle unfriendly, I just can't handle starving. Wait here." The sheriff disappeared into his office and returned minutes later with a weathered map. "Follow this trail. Can't miss the place's biggest ranch in these parts." With renewed determination, Grace set out on foot toward the Oakley Ranch as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. Each step reminded her how far she'd come from her privileged Boston life, and how desperate her circumstances had become after her father's gambling debts left her penniless and hunted by his creditors. The wind picked up as the sun began to set, and Grace hugged herself against the cold. The road stretched endlessly before her, and she began to wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake when she finally spotted a sprawling ranch house nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lights glowed in the windows. The scene might have been welcoming if not for the imposing fence, and the large sign declaring Oakley Ranch No Trespassers in bold letters. Grace pushed open the gate and made her way up the path to the front door. Before she could knock, a small figure burst from around the corner of the house, nearly colliding with her. "Whoa there," Grace exclaimed, steadying herself. A boy of about 5 years stared up at her with curious blue eyes beneath a mop of unruly dark hair. "Who are you?" he demanded with all the authority a child his age could muster. "I'm Grace Turner. I've come to speak with Mr. Oakley about work." The boy's face lit up. "My pa, I'm Caleb Oakley. Are you going to be our new cook? Last one left 'cause pa was too grumpy." Grace couldn't help but smile. "Well, I'm hoping to be your new housekeeper if your father will have me." "Caleb," a deep voice called from inside. "What did I tell you about running off when it's getting dark?" The front door swung open to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered man with the same dark hair as his son, though his was streaked with premature silver at the temples. Wade Oakley's face was weathered from years under the Montana sun, and a scar ran along his jawline, giving him a forbidding appearance despite his handsome features. His piercing blue eyes narrowed when he saw Grace. "Who are you?" he asked, unconsciously echoing his son's earlier question, though with considerably less warmth. "Grace Turner, sir. The sheriff in town mentioned you might be in need of household help." She lifted her chin, summoning her courage. "I'll cook and clean for nothing, just a roof over my head and meals. I'm a hard worker and not interested," he cut her off, placing a protective hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Come on, son. Supper's getting cold." But Pa, Caleb protested. Look at her. She's pretty and nice, and I bet she can cook better than you. Wade's jaw tightened. Caleb inside, now. The boy reluctantly obeyed, but not before giving Grace an apologetic look. Wade turned back to Grace. Miss Turner, we don't need help, especially not charity help. Grace's pride flared. It's not charity if I'm working, Mr. Oakley, and with all due respect, your son seems to think otherwise. Wade's expression darkened. My son is 5. He doesn't make the decisions around here. Clearly, Grace replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Well then, I'll trouble you no further. Good evening, Mr. Oakley. She turned to leave, fighting the trembling in her legs. The prospect of walking back to town in the gathering darkness was terrifying, but she'd rather face wild animals than spend another minute with this insufferable man. Wait, Wade called out gruffly as she reached the gate. It's getting dark. You can't walk back to town now. Grace paused but didn't turn around. I've faced worse than darkness, Mr. Oakley. Maybe so, but there's wolves in these parts. His voice softened slightly. You can stay the night in the spare room. We'll discuss this properly in the morning. Grace hesitated. I don't want to impose. You already have, Wade said, but there was no real bite to his words. Come on inside before we both freeze. The interior of the ranch house was unexpectedly warm and well built, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. Dinner dishes were piled in the sink, clothes were scattered across furniture, and dust coated nearly every surface. Caleb bounced excitedly when Grace entered. You're staying. Are you going to make breakfast? Pa burns the flapjacks something awful, Caleb, Wade warned, but there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Miss Turner is our guest for tonight, that's all. For now, Caleb whispered conspiratorially to Grace, loud enough for his father to hear. After a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Wade had prepared, he showed Grace to a small but clean bedroom. It was my wife's sewing room, he explained awkwardly. Haven't had much use for it since. I'm sorry for your loss, Grace said softly. Wade nodded stiffly. Good night, Miss Turner. The next morning, Grace rose early. She found the kitchen and immediately set to work, determined to prove her worth. By the time Wade and Caleb stumbled downstairs, she had prepared a breakfast of fresh biscuits, eggs, and bacon she'd found in the larder. Wade stopped short at the kitchen threshold, staring at the transformation. Not only was breakfast laid out, but the dishes from the previous night were washed and put away, and the kitchen surfaces gleamed. Morning, Mr. Oakley. Caleb. Grace gestured to the table. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to thank you for your hospitality. Look, Pa, Caleb exclaimed, already reaching for a biscuit. Real breakfast, not burnt. Wade sat down slowly, his expression unreadable. You didn't have to do this. Consider it an audition, Grace replied, pouring coffee into his cup. I meant what I said yesterday. I need work, Mr. Oakley, and you need help. It seems a simple enough arrangement. Wade took a bite of the biscuit and couldn't suppress a small sound of appreciation. These are good. My mother taught me to cook, Grace said, taking a seat across from him. Before she passed. And what brings you to Silver Creek, Miss Turner? Wade asked, studying her. Not many single women travel to Montana Territory alone. Grace hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I needed a fresh start, running from something. His tone wasn't accusatory, merely matter of fact. In a manner of speaking, she admitted. But not the law, if that's your concern. Wade nodded slowly. A month's trial, room, board, and $5 a week. If it doesn't work out, you leave without argument. Relief flooded through Grace. Thank you, Mr. Oakley. You won't regret it. We'll see about that, Wade replied, but Caleb was already cheering. The first week was an adjustment for everyone. Grace tackled the house with vigor, cleaning rooms that hadn't seen a dust cloth in years. Wade was often absent during the day, working with his ranch hands in the pastures or mending fences, but Caleb became her constant shadow, eager to help and even more eager to talk. "Ma died when I was born," he told Grace matter-of-factly as they hung laundry. "Pa has a picture of her, but he keeps it in his room. Says I look like her, 'cept for my eyes. Those are Pa's." "Your father loves you very much," Grace said, noticing how the rough cowboy softened whenever his son was near. "He's the best pa ever," Caleb declared loyally. "Just sad sometimes. And grumpy." He looked up at Grace hopefully. "He smiles more since you came." Grace doubted that was true, but she couldn't deny that Wade seemed to be thawing toward her, if only slightly. He'd begun lingering over dinner, occasionally contributing to the conversation rather than eating in stoic silence. On her 10th day at the ranch, disaster struck. Grace was preparing stew for dinner when she heard frantic shouts from outside. She rushed to the door to see ranch hands carrying Wade toward the house, his face contorted in pain. "What happened?" she gasped. "Horse spooked and threw him," one of the men explained. "Landed bad on his leg, might be broken." They laid Wade on his bed, and Grace immediately took charge, sending one of the hands for the doctor in town, while she cut away Wade's pant leg to reveal an already swelling ankle. "Doesn't look broken," she said, gently probing the injury. "But a bad sprain at least." Wade hissed in pain. "I don't have time for this. The cattle drive is in 3 weeks, and there's still the north pasture to clear." "Your men can handle it," Grace said firmly. "You're not going anywhere on this ankle for at least a few days." The doctor confirmed Grace's assessment when he arrived: a severe sprain that needed rest. Wade was a terrible patient, frustrated by his immobility and the timing of his injury. But Grace was undaunted by his growling, bringing him meals, helping him move when necessary, and keeping Caleb entertained. On the 3rd evening of his confinement, Wade watched as Grace read to Caleb by his bedside, the boy's eyes growing heavy as she wove a tale of knights and dragons. "You're good with him," Wade said quietly after Caleb had fallen asleep. Grace smiled, gently stroking the boy's hair. "He makes it easy. He's a wonderful child." "His mother would have been a better parent than I am," Wade said, a rare moment of vulnerability. "Catherine was gentle, patient." "Everything I'm not." "You're exactly what Caleb needs," Grace countered. "He adores you, and children don't need perfect parents, they need parents who love them perfectly. Anyone can see you'd move mountains for him." Wade's eyes, usually so guarded, held something new as they studied her face. "You're not what I expected, Grace Turner." Her heart fluttered at the use of her first name. "What did you expect? Someone who'd give up and leave within days, someone who'd complain about the isolation or the work." A half-smile curved his lips. "Not someone who'd face down a cranky cowboy and his wild child without flinching." Grace laughed softly. "Well, I need this job, and—" She hesitated. "I've grown fond of this place and its inhabitants." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Caleb stirred and broke the spell. As November settled over the ranch, bringing the first dusting of snow, Grace found herself feeling more at home than she ever had in Boston. The work was hard but satisfying, and the simple routines of ranch life suited her. Wade's ankle healed, and he returned to his duties, but something had changed between them. He sought out her company in the evenings, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence by the fire while she mended or knitted. Caleb, meanwhile, had decided that Grace belonged with them permanently. "When are you going to marry Pa?" he asked one afternoon as Grace taught him to roll out pie dough. Grace nearly dropped the rolling pin. "Caleb, what a question." "Well, Tommy Wilson's pa married their housekeeper last spring, and now Tommy has a new baby sister," Caleb said with the inexorable logic of a 5-year-old. I'd like a sister or a brother. Either's fine. That's not how these things work, Grace explained, feeling her cheeks burn. Your father and we're friends. Employer and employee. Caleb looked unconvinced. Pa looks at you like Mr. Peterson looks at the apple pie in your window, all hungry like. Grace couldn't help laughing even as her heart raced at the thought. You have quite an imagination. Nope, just good eyes, Caleb said with a sage nod. Pa told me so. The conversation troubled Grace more than she wanted to admit. In the 2 months she'd been at the ranch, her feelings for Wade had grown from cautious respect to something much deeper and more dangerous. She admired his dedication to his son, his unwavering work ethic, and the quiet integrity that guided his every action. And yes, she found herself watching him when he wasn't looking the way his strong hands worked leather, how his eyes crinkled when he laughed at something Caleb said. But Grace had come to Montana to escape complications, not create new ones. And becoming involved with her employer would be complicated indeed. The first real snowfall came in early December, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Caleb was beside himself with excitement, begging to go sledding on the hill behind the barn. I'll take him, Grace offered when she saw Wade eyeing the stack of paperwork on his desk. We won't go far. Wade looked up gratefully. Are you sure? He can be a handful in the snow, positive. I used to love sledding as a girl. She bundled Caleb into his warmest clothes and they headed out, Caleb pulling his wooden sled behind him. The afternoon was magical clear blue skies, pristine snow, and Caleb's delighted shrieks as they slid down the hill again and again. Grace found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, caught up in the simple joy of play. They were making snow angels when Caleb suddenly sat up, pointing. Look, Pa's watching us. Sure enough, Wade stood at the fence line, a smile playing at his lips as he observed their fun. When he realized they'd spotted him, he walked over, pretending sternness. And who gave you permission to have fun without me? He asked Caleb, who giggled. Grace did. We've been sledding and it's the best day ever. Is that so? Wade looked at Grace, snowflakes caught in her eyelashes and color high in her cheeks. Something in his expression made her breath catch. Without warning, Caleb scooped up a handful of snow and threw it at his father. It hit Wade squarely in the chest. Oh, you're asking for trouble now, Wade growled playfully, gathering snow of his own. What followed was an epic snowball fight, with alliances forming and breaking until all three collapsed in the snow, breathless with laughter. I can't remember the last time I played in the snow, Wade admitted, lying beside Grace while Caleb made another snow angel nearby. It suits you, Grace said softly. Being happy. Wade turned his head to look at her, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. You bring that out in us, in me. Before Grace could respond, Caleb flopped down between them. Can we have hot chocolate? Grace makes the best hot chocolate. Of course we can, she said, grateful for the interruption. Wade's words had stirred something dangerous in her heart, something like hope. Back at the house, as they warmed themselves by the fire with steaming mugs, Wade made an announcement. The Christmas social is next weekend in town. I thought we might all go. Caleb whooped with excitement, but Grace felt a flicker of anxiety. She deliberately avoided town as much as possible, fearing that someone might recognize her, even this far from Boston. I'm not sure that's a good idea, she said hesitantly. There's so much to do here and the work will wait, Wade interrupted gently. And Caleb should have some fun with other children. It's not good for him to be so isolated. Please, Grace, Caleb pleaded. There's going to be candy and music and a real Christmas tree. How could she refuse that face? All right, she conceded, but I don't have anything suitable to wear. There are trunks of Catherine's things in the attic, Wade said. She was about your size. I'm sure you could find something." The idea of wearing his dead wife's clothing should have felt wrong, but Wade's expression was so earnest that Grace found herself nodding. "Thank you. That's very kind." The morning of the social, Grace nervously tried on several of Catherine's dresses before settling on a simple but elegant forest green gown with lace trim. It fit as if it had been made for her, and when she descended the stairs, both Wade and Caleb stared. "You look like a princess," Caleb declared. Wade said nothing for a long moment, his eyes taking in every detail. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You look beautiful, Grace." The social was held in the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. It seemed all of Silver Creek had turned out for the occasion, and Grace found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations as she entered with Wade and Caleb. "Don't mind them," Wade murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "They're just not used to seeing me with a beautiful woman." Grace blushed, but before she could respond, Caleb tugged at her hand. "Can I go play with Tommy and the other kids?" "Stay where we can see you," Wade instructed, and Caleb dashed off, left alone with Wade. Grace felt suddenly shy. He looked handsome in his best clothes, his dark hair neatly combed, his usual stubble shaved clean. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, offering his hand as the small band struck up a waltz. Grace hesitated. "It's been a long time since I danced." "For me too," Wade admitted. "We can be rusty together." His hand was warm and strong as he led her to the dance floor. They moved awkwardly at first, but soon found their rhythm, turning gracefully among the other couples. Wade held her with respectful distance, but Grace was acutely aware of every point where their bodies connected. "Everyone's watching us," she whispered. "Let them," Wade replied, his eyes never leaving her face. "I'm only looking at you." The intensity in his gaze made her heart race. This was dangerous territory, feelings she couldn't afford to indulge. When the dance ended, Grace excused herself to get punch, needing a moment to compose herself. She was standing by the refreshment table when she overheard two women talking nearby. "That's her, the woman staying at Oakley's place," one said. "Playing house with him and the boy. Bold as brass, coming to the social like she belongs," the other replied. "You know what they're saying in Boston about her? My cousin wrote me. Her father embezzled a fortune before killing himself, and she fled before they could question her involvement." Grace froze, the cup slipping from her fingers. The crash drew attention, including Wade's, who started toward her with concern. "Excuse me," Grace managed, pushing past him and hurrying outside into the cold night air. She didn't go far, just to the small porch of the town hall, but she needed to escape those knowing looks and whispered accusations. The worst part was that they weren't entirely wrong. Her father had stolen from his investors before taking his own life, though Grace had known nothing of his schemes. She'd fled not from justice, but from the men he'd borrowed from, who believed she knew where he'd hidden their money. "Grace," Wade's voice came from behind her. "What happened in there?" She couldn't bring herself to look at him. "You should have asked about my past before taking me in." "I know enough," he said, moving to stand beside her. "Sheriff got a telegram about you a month ago, asking if you'd been seen in these parts." Grace whirled to face him, shocked. "And you said nothing." "Wasn't my business," Wade shrugged. "Whatever you're running from, you've given me no reason to doubt you. You've been nothing but good to me and Caleb." Tears pricked at Grace's eyes. "My father, he did terrible things. Stole money, lied to everyone. When he died, people thought I must have known, must have helped, but I didn't. I swear I didn't." "I believe you," Wade said simply. "How can you? You barely know me." Wade's hand came up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I know enough. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you're kind to my son, patient with my moods. I know you sing when you think no one's listening and that you can't resist stopping to watch the sunset, no matter how many chores are waiting." His voice softened. "I know that when you came to my door offering to work for nothing, I nearly sent away the best thing that's happened to us in 5 years." Grace's heart pounded as Wade stepped closer. "Wade, Grace." Caleb's voice cut through the moment as he burst onto the porch. "I won a prize for Pin the Tail on the Donkey. Look." He proudly displayed a small wooden toy, then frowned, looking between them. "Why are you crying, Grace? Is Pa being grumpy again?" Grace laughed despite her tears. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy." "That's silly," Caleb declared. Then, with the transparent scheming of a child, he added, "Know what would make you even happier? If you married Pa and became my real ma." "Caleb," Wade began, but his son was on a mission. "I got something for you, Grace. Been saving it." He dug in his pocket and pulled out a small brass ring, clearly from a child's game. "Mrs. Wilson at the store let me have it. Said every proposal needs a ring." Before either adult could react, Caleb took Grace's hand and slipped the toy ring onto her finger. "There. Now you have to stay forever." Grace stared at the little brass circle, too stunned to speak. "Caleb," Wade said, kneeling to his son's level, "that's not how these things work. You can't just decide people should get married." "Why not? You love Grace. You told Mr. Peterson you did when you were fixing his fence." Wade's face flushed. "That was a private conversation, son." "And Grace loves us too," Caleb continued, undaunted. "She makes your favorite pie even though I ask for apple, and she sewed up my bear without complaining, and she looks at you all soft when you're not looking." Grace felt her own cheeks burning now. "Caleb, is he wrong?" Wade asked quietly, rising to his feet. "About any of it." The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility. Grace looked from Wade to Caleb, this little family that had come to mean everything to her. "No," she whispered. "He's not wrong." Wade's eyes lit with hope. "Grace, I'm not good with words. I'm stubborn and set in my ways, but these past months with you, I never thought I'd feel this way again. Maybe never felt this way before." He took her hand, the one with Caleb's toy ring. "I'm not asking because of what people might say or because it would be convenient. I'm asking because I love you." "Are you asking something?" Grace said, her voice trembling. Wade smiled. "I am. Grace Turner, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Not for nothing, but for everything I have to give. Say yes." Caleb bounced on his toes. "Please say yes." Grace laughed through her tears. "Yes. Yes to both of you." Wade pulled her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening as she responded with all the love she'd held back for months. Caleb cheered, throwing his arms around their legs. "I told you my ring would work," he crowed. Later that night, after Caleb had fallen asleep on the ride home and been tucked into bed, Wade and Grace sat before the fire, his arm around her shoulders. "I should get you a proper ring," he said, touching the toy ring she still wore. Grace shook her head. "This is perfect." It came from Caleb's heart. "He adores you," Wade said, "almost as much as I do." "I never thought I'd find this," Grace admitted. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was just hoping to survive. And now," she turned to face him, cupping his cheek, "now I'm hoping for forever." The wedding took place on Christmas Eve. A small affair at the ranch with just a few friends, and the ranch hands in attendance. Caleb stood proudly as his father's best man, holding the rings, including a proper gold band Wade had purchased in town to accompany Caleb's brass one, which Grace insisted on keeping on her right hand. The minister pronounced them husband and wife as snow fell softly outside, transforming the world into a glittering wonderland. Wade kissed his bride as Caleb applauded wildly, and Grace knew she had finally found her home. That night, After the guests had departed and Caleb had reluctantly gone to bed, Wade carried Grace across the threshold of their bedroom. "Mrs. Oakley," he said, savoring the name, "has a nice ring to it." "It does indeed," Grace agreed, her heart full as she looked up at the man who had gone from reluctant employer to beloved husband in the span of 3 months. "I never thought I'd have this again," Wade confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "A family, hope, joy." "Neither did I," Grace whispered. "But here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, drawing her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. Spring came early to Silver Creek in 1886. The snows melted, revealing tender green shoots and wildflowers across the ranch. Grace stood on the porch, watching Caleb help Wade with the new foal born just days before. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, a secret she would share with her husband that evening. From desperate begging at a stranger's door to finding a love she never expected, Grace's journey had been far from easy, but as she watched her family, she wouldn't change a single step of the path that had led her here. "Grace," Caleb called, waving excitedly. "Come see, the foal is standing up." She laughed and went to join them, Wade's arm slipping around her waist as she approached. His kiss on her temple was a promise kept, a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures come when we have nothing left to give but ourselves.